Welcome to HFY Galaxy Tales. Like this video and subscribe the channel for more HFY stories. Look, I have been around for 347 cycles. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched species evolve from primitive tool users to sophisticated star travelers. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for the day the Galactic Council decided to put a human in charge. My name is Vrok. I am a Cultorian, which means I have 4 arms, excellent pattern recognition skills, and an unhealthy obsession with proper protocols. I served as the Council's administrative coordinator for 62 years before that fateful morning when everything went sideways. The Council chamber buzzed with its usual pre-session chatter. Representatives from 217 species filled the tiered seating, their translators creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and growls. I stood at my station, reviewing the agenda for the 3000th emergency session that month. The Vraxian trade routes were collapsing again. The Quilmech had declared war on the Tantheri over a disputed moon. Standard stuff. Then Ambassador Threll, a massive Gorvanite with skin like volcanic rock, cleared his throat. The sound echoed through the chamber like stones grinding together. Distinguished members, he began, his voice causing ripples in the water tanks where the aquatic delegates floated. We face an unprecedented crisis. Our current leadership structure has failed us 17 times in the last cycle alone. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. He was not wrong. The rotating chairmanship had become a joke. Last month, the Plenthax chair had spent the entire session trying to convince everyone that the solution to resource scarcity was interpretive dance. I propose, Threll continued, raising one boulder-sized fist, that we seek outside perspective. A species known for unconventional problem-solving and adaptive strategies. My primary stomach sank. I knew exactly where this was going. You cannot be serious, hissed Counselor Yixa, a serpentine whose scales shimmered with agitation. The humans have only been spacefaring for what, 200 years? They still use combustion for recreational purposes. They call it camping, offered Delegate Morphin helpfully. Precisely my point. Threll remained unmoved. The humans have survived countless extinction events on their death world. They have united fractured populations, rebuilt from devastating wars, and somehow convinced themselves that throwing spherical objects into hoops constitutes entertainment. If anyone can fix this mess, it is them. I wanted to object. I really did. But the vote happened faster than a Quilmech border dispute, and before my central brain could process what was happening, the measure passed with a 73% majority. 2 weeks later, I found myself standing at Docking Bay 12, waiting for our new Supreme Coordinator to arrive. The human ship looked like someone had welded a dozen different vessels together during a particularly aggressive brainstorming session. It lurched through the docking sequence, scraping against the bay doors with a screech that made my auditory sensors hurt. The airlock hissed open, and out stepped Marcus Reeves. He was tall for a human, with dark skin, close-cropped hair just beginning to gray at the temples, and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore what I would later learn was called a bomber jacket over standard diplomatic attire, and he carried a worn leather bag that had clearly seen better days. "Vrok, right?" he said, extending one hand. I stared at the appendage. "We do not perform physical contact rituals in formal settings, Supreme Coordinator." "Yeah, about that title," Marcus said, lowering his hand without offense. "Just call me Marcus. Supreme Coordinator sounds like something from a bad science fiction novel." I blinked all 3 of my eyes in sequence. "You prefer informal address protocols?" "I prefer people saying what they mean without drowning in bureaucratic nonsense." He grinned, and I noticed that humans had remarkably many teeth. "Now, are you going to show me around or do I need to figure out this place myself?" Because fair warning, last time I tried that, I ended up in a janitorial closet having an existential conversation with a cleaning robot. Despite myself, I felt my mandibles twitch in what my species considers amusement. "This way, please." The first council session under Marcus's leadership remains one of my most vivid memories. He walked into that chamber wearing the same jacket, completely ignoring the formal robes we had prepared for him. Ambassador Threll began the session with a 40-minute overview of the Vraxian trade crisis, complete with holographic charts, economic projections, and historical precedent dating back 600 years. Marcus listened to about 5 minutes of this before holding up one hand. Stop. The chamber fell silent. You could have heard a fluorescein mold spore drop. Let me get this straight, Marcus said, standing and walking around his chair instead of sitting in it like a normal being. The Vraxians control the primary shipping lanes through the Calta Nebula, but they are charging fees that are, what did you call them, economically prohibitive? Extortionate, corrected Threll. The rates have increased by 400% in the last cycle. Right. And nobody can use alternate routes because the nebula is the only stable passage through that sector. Any other path adds 30 days to shipping times. Marcus nodded slowly, then pulled out a primitive data tablet from his bag. Vrok, can you get me the engineering specifications for standard commercial vessels? Specifically, their shielding capabilities. I transmitted the files immediately, my curiosity piqued despite my better judgment. Marcus studied the screen for perhaps 3 minutes. The entire council waited in awkward silence. Councillor Yixa's scales had gone from agitated shimmer to confused matte. Okay, Marcus said finally. Here is what we are going to do. Vrok, put me in touch with the Havranite Trade Consortium. Threll, I need you to pull every ship that is currently idle in council jurisdiction. Yixa, your people are good with energy systems, right? The Serpentine have the most advanced plasma technology in the galaxy, Yixa said, pride momentarily overriding confusion. Perfect. We are going to upgrade the shields on council trade ships to handle higher radiation, then we are going to open a new route through the Kelvin expanse. Every translator in the room must have malfunctioned simultaneously because the chamber erupted into chaos. The Kelvin expanse is a radiation death trap, someone shouted. No ship can survive those energy levels, another voice added. Marcus waited for the noise to die down, his expression never changing. Not with standard shielding, no. But if we layer serpentine plasma dispersion with Havranite structural reinforcement and adjust the harmonic frequency to match the radiation signature. He manipulated his tablet, projecting a new set of calculations that made my secondary brain hurt. Ships can make it through in 18 days with acceptable risk levels. Acceptable? Yixa's scales were practically glowing now. You call exposing crews to variable radiation acceptable? I call it better than economic strangulation, Marcus replied calmly. Look, the Vraxians are not going to lower their rates because we ask nicely. But if we create viable competition, basic economics takes over. They either adjust their prices or lose market share. Either way, we win. Ambassador Threll's rocky features arranged themselves into something that might have been a smile. How long would this take to implement? Give me 3 weeks. Impossible, I said reflexively. The approval process alone would take months. Testing protocols, safety reviews, diplomatic negotiations with the Havranites. Marcus turned to look at me, and for the first time I understood what humans meant by a piercing gaze. Vrok, how long have you been trying to solve this problem the proper way? 14 months. Right. So we have established that the proper way does not work. Now we try the improper way. He turned back to the assembly. Anyone here actually want to stop me? The silence was deafening. Great. Meeting adjourned. Vrok, clear my schedule for the next 3 weeks and get me a secure line to the Havranite Supreme Director. The rest of you, go do whatever it is you normally do when not complaining about problems you refuse to solve. He walked out of the chamber, leaving 216 stunned delegates in his wake. I should have felt outraged. I should have filed formal protests about procedural violations and chain-of-command disruptions. Instead, I found myself rushing to catch up with him, all four of my arms already working to execute his instructions. Marcus, wait. You cannot just dismiss the council like that. He glanced back without slowing down. Pretty sure I just did. Besides, they looked relieved. When was the last time a meeting ended before everyone fell asleep? That is not the point. There are protocols, procedures, proper channels. Vrok. He stopped so suddenly I nearly collided with him. Let me ask you something. Why did you become an administrator? The question caught me completely off guard. To serve the council. To maintain order and facilitate effective governance. No, before all the formal language. Why? I activated my secondary vocal cords, a sign of discomfort in my species. I wanted to help. To make things work better. Right. So help me make things work better, just without the 17 layers of bureaucratic nonsense that have calcified around every decision. He started walking again. Trust me on this one. Sometimes the fastest way through a maze is to knock down a few walls. Against all my training, all my instincts, I found myself agreeing. The next 3 weeks redefined my understanding of organized chaos. Marcus worked 18-hour days, sleeping in his office when he bothered to sleep at all. He bypassed every traditional communication channel, calling people directly regardless of rank or protocol. He made decisions in minutes that should have taken months. And somehow, impossibly, it all worked. The Havronites agreed to provide structural materials in exchange for access to serpentine energy research. The serpentine agreed because Marcus convinced them it would accelerate their own projects by decades. Engineers from 17 different species worked around the clock, fueled by what Marcus called coffee, and what I suspected was actually mild psychoactive stimulant. On day 21, the first test convoy entered the Kelvin expanse. I stood beside Marcus in the observation deck, watching the sensor feeds with my primary heart pounding hard enough to hurt. The ships disappeared into the roiling radiation storms, their upgraded shields glowing like miniature stars. This is insane, I muttered. Probably, Marcus agreed. But if it works, it is also brilliant. And if it does not work, well, I am sure the council will enjoy saying I told you so. 16 hours later, the convoy emerged on the far side. Every ship intact, every crew member healthy, travel time reduced by 40% compared to the Vraxian route. The news spread through council space faster than light speed. Within a week, shipping companies were clamoring for shield upgrades. Within 2 weeks, the Vraxians had lowered their fees by 60%. Within a month, trade volume had increased by 200% across all sectors. Marcus barely acknowledged the success. He was already 3 problems ahead, working on a solution to the Quilmectanthri conflict that somehow involved competitive cooking and mutual cultural appreciation. I found him in his office late one night, surrounded by holographic displays showing troop movements, resource allocations, and what appeared to be recipes for something called fusion cuisine. You should rest, I said. Even humans need sleep. Sleep is for people without galaxy-spanning logistics problems. But he dimmed the displays anyway, rubbing his eyes with both hands. Vrok, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did the council really choose me? And do not give me the official line about unconventional problem solving. I settled into the chair across from his desk, considering my words carefully. Because we were drowning, and we needed someone who did not know they were supposed to be afraid of the water. Marcus laughed, a short, sharp sound. That is either the most inspiring thing I have ever heard or the most terrifying. Perhaps both. Yeah. He looked out the viewport at the stars beyond. You know what the funny part is? Back on Earth, I was considered a troublemaker. Too impatient, too willing to break rules, too focused on results instead of process. Got passed over for promotion 6 times because I did not play the game properly. And now you lead 217 species. Now I lead 217 species, he echoed. The universe has a twisted sense of humor. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment before he spoke again. Tomorrow, we are going to solve the Quilmectanthary thing. Then next week, I want to tackle the resource distribution inefficiencies in the outer colonies. After that, you will find another dozen crises to solve, I finished. Exactly. He grinned that too many teeth grin again. You ready for this, Vrok? I activated all 4 of my hands in a gesture of commitment. Someone has to keep you from violating every protocol simultaneously. That is the spirit. As I left his office that night, I realized something profound had shifted in me. For 62 years, I had believed that order, structure, and proper procedure were the foundations of civilization. Watching Marcus work, I understood that sometimes civilization needed something else entirely. It needed someone willing to look at impossible problems and say, watch this, then proceed to solve them through sheer audacity and refusal to accept conventional limitations. The humans had a saying that Marcus taught me. Fortune favors the bold. Sitting there in council headquarters, surrounded by species that had been traveling the stars for millennia while humans were still figuring out fire, I finally understood what that meant. And I was beginning to suspect that the galaxy had no idea what it had unleashed. The Quilmectanthary War ended with a cooking competition. I am not making this up, though I wish I were. My reputation as a serious administrator took a beating that I am still recovering from 2 cycles later. Here is how it happened. The Quilmectanthary had been fighting over a moon called Sectors 9 for 6 generations. Both species claimed historical ownership based on ancient settlement rights, religious significance, and approximately 14,000 pages of legal documentation that nobody except me had actually read all the way through. Marcus read the first 3 pages, said a word that my translator refused to process, and threw the entire file into his recycling unit. Vrok, what do the Quilmectanthary actually want from this moon? He asked, feet propped up on his desk in a posture that violated at least 9 dignity protocols. Sovereignty, territorial recognition, vindication of historical claims. No, I mean what do they actually want? What would make them happy? I consulted my files. Both species have strong cultural connections to the moon. The Quilmec hold it sacred as the birthplace of their philosopher Krenth. The Tanthari believe their ancestor Spirit Valorix achieved enlightenment there. So they are fighting over who gets to be right about something that happened thousands of years ago. Essentially, yes. Marcus stared at the ceiling for approximately 30 seconds, then sat up so fast his chair nearly tipped backward. Get me representatives from both sides. Not the generals or politicians. I want their cultural ministers, their historians, and anyone who actually cares about the traditions instead of the territory. That is highly irregular. Military conflicts require military leadership at negotiations. Vrok, my friend, irregular is what I do best. Make it happen. 3 days later, I found myself in a conference room that Marcus had converted into something he called a cultural exchange zone. He had removed all the formal seating, brought in low tables, and somehow acquired actual food from both Quilmec and Tanthari homeworlds. Cultural Minister Plenka of the Quilmec arrived first, her green carapace gleaming with suspicion. What is the meaning of this informal setting? Where are the negotiation teams? No teams, Marcus said cheerfully. Just people who actually give a damn about what they are fighting for. Ah, and here comes Minister Trovax. The Tanthari representative entered, his crystalline form refracting light in patterns that indicated deep confusion. When he saw Plenka, those patterns shifted to aggressive red. You expect us to negotiate with our enemies in this common room? I expect you to cook with them, actually, Marcus replied. The silence that followed could have suffocated a small star. I beg your pardon. Plenka's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. Marcus gestured to the tables, which I now noticed had been equipped with various heating elements and preparation tools. Both your cultures have incredible culinary traditions. The Quilmec are famous for your 7-layered grain ceremonies. The Tanthri crystal baking is considered art across 12 sectors. So here is the deal. You are going to teach each other your traditional dishes. Specifically, the ones connected to sectors 9. This is absurd. Trovax's crystalline structure vibrated with indignation. We are discussing matters of territorial sovereignty, not recipes. Yeah, about that. Marcus pulled up a holographic display. I had my team do some actual research. Turns out, before your species ever met each other, you both visited that moon for the same reason. The unique mineral composition makes it perfect for a specific type of ceremonial food preparation. Quilmec grain rituals require those exact trace elements. Tanthri crystal baking needs that precise thermal environment. Plenka and Trovax both went very still. You are saying. Plenka began slowly. I am saying you are not fighting over who is right. You are fighting over access to a shared resource that is important to both your cultures. And fighting means neither of you gets to use it. Marcus leaned forward. Or, crazy idea, you could share it. Set up a cultural preservation zone. Take turns using the facilities. Maybe, and I know this sounds wild, learn something from each other in the process. The Quilmec do not share sacred spaces. Plenka declared. Neither do the Tanthri. Trovax added. Cool. Then keep fighting. I will just reroute all council trade through routes that avoid both your territories, impose economic sanctions until you stop shooting at each other, and generally make your stubbornness everyone else's problem. Marcus shrugged. Or you could make me some food and see what happens. Your choice. I have never seen two species representatives look so simultaneously outraged and cornered. But they stayed. And 4 hours later, Cultural Minister Plenka was teaching Minister Trovax the proper temperature gradient for 7-layer grain ceremony while Trovax explained the harmonic frequencies needed for crystal baking, and somewhere in between measurements and techniques, they stopped being enemies and started being colleagues who happened to have a lot in common. The peace treaty was signed 6 weeks later. Sectors 9 became the first dual sovereignty cultural zone in galactic history. And Marcus moved on to his next crisis before the ink was dry. The resource distribution problem in the outer colonies took longer to solve, mostly because it involved convincing 47 different administrators that their precious regulations were actively causing the shortages they were trying to prevent. Marcus handled this by inviting all of them to a single meeting, locking the doors, and refusing to let anyone leave until they had agreed on a simplified system. This is kidnapping, protested Administrator Frel after hour 6. This is leadership, Marcus countered. Also, I ordered food. You are all going to eat together like civilized beings and remember that you are on the same side. By hour 12, they had a new distribution framework. By hour 15, they were actually laughing together. By hour 18, when Marcus finally unlocked the doors, half of them did not want to leave. I asked him about this later, about his ability to turn adversaries into allies with nothing but persistence and shared meals. People forget they are people when you let them hide behind titles and protocols, he explained. Make them sit together, eat together, solve problems together, and suddenly they remember that the being across the table is not an obstacle, just someone with different priorities. That seems overly simplistic. Most profound truths are. Complexity is just what we add when we are afraid of simplicity. 6 months into his tenure, Marcus had resolved more conflicts than the council had managed in the previous decade. Trade was flowing, wars were ending, and species that had not spoken to each other in centuries were collaborating on joint projects. The council loved him. The people loved him. I was working harder than I ever had in my life and somehow enjoying it. Then the Vraxians declared war on the council. I received the official declaration at 0400 station time. By 0405, I was sprinting toward Marcus's quarters, all 4 arms waving in panic. He answered the door in sleep clothes, hair sticking up at odd angles, looking remarkably unconcerned for someone whose organization had just been threatened with military annihilation. "Let me guess," he said. "The Vraxians are upset about losing their monopoly." "How did you? Never mind. Marcus, this is serious. They have mobilized 300 warships. Their declaration states they will destroy any council vessel that enters the Calta Nebula sector." "Okay. Give me 20 minutes to shower and eat something. Then call an emergency session." 20 minutes. "Marcus, we are facing an existential threat." "Vrok, we are always facing an existential threat. That is why they pay us the big credits." He paused. "They do pay us, right? I never actually checked." The emergency session began at 0600. Every council member attended, their various forms of anxiety filling the chamber with agitated sounds and smells. Marcus walked in eating something he called a breakfast burrito, which appeared to be multiple food groups wrapped in a flat bread. Several delegates made disgusted noises. He ignored them. "Right, so the Vraxians are mad. Anyone surprised by this?" He took another bite of his burrito. "Nobody. Great. Here is what we are going to do. We are going to call their bluff." Ambassador Threll's rocky eyebrows rose. "Call their bluff? They have 300 warships. They have 300 very expensive warships that cost a fortune to maintain and operate. They are a commercial empire, not a military power. This whole display is designed to scare us into backing down from the new trade routes." "And if you are wrong?" asked Councillor Yixa. "Then we fight them and probably lose, and the galaxy descends into chaos, and everyone blames the human who thought he was smarter than he actually was." Marcus finished his burrito and wiped his hands. "But I am not wrong. Vrok, send a message to the Vraxian High Chancellor. Tell them we appreciate their theatrical declaration, but council vessels will continue using all established routes. Furthermore, any act of aggression against council ships will be considered an act of war against all member species." "That is extremely aggressive posturing," I said quietly. "That is meeting force with force. They need to know we are not afraid." He looked around the chamber. "Unless you all want to go back to paying extortion fees and letting bullies dictate policy." The vote to support Marcus's message was unanimous. For 3 days, the galaxy held its breath. Vraxian warships patrolled the nebula borders. Council trade vessels continued their routes. Tension built like static before a storm. Then, on the 4th day, the Vraxian High Chancellor requested a private communication with Marcus. I was there when he took the call. Chancellor Vrok appeared in holographic form, his elongated features arranged in what might have been respect or might have been irritation. "You are either very brave or very foolish, human." "I prefer to think of myself as practical," Marcus replied. "You cannot afford this war, Chancellor. Your economy is built on trade, not conquest. Fighting us means losing access to council markets, which represent 60% of your revenue. Even if you win militarily, you lose economically. You seem very certain of this. I am certain that you are a smart leader who understands cost-benefit analysis. So let me offer you a better option. Lower your transit fees to reasonable levels, and we will designate the Calta route as a shared passage. You maintain control, earn steady income, and avoid a war that benefits nobody. Or keep threatening us, and watch your economy collapse when every council species embargo your goods." Chancellor Vrok was silent for a long moment. "You would make a dangerous enemy, Marcus Reeves. Good thing I would rather make a profitable ally." The war ended before it began. The Vraxian warships withdrew. Transit fees stabilized at reasonable rates. And Marcus had somehow turned a military crisis into a trade negotiation without firing a single shot. That night, I found him on the observation deck, staring out at the stars with an expression I had never seen before. Something like weariness mixed with satisfaction. "You should be celebrating," I said. You just prevented a war. I delayed a war, he corrected. There will be another crisis next week, and another after that. This job is like trying to hold back an ocean with a bucket. Then why do you do it? He thought about this for a while. You remember what you said when I asked why the council chose me? About needing someone who did not know they were supposed to be afraid? Yes. I think it is more than that. I think they needed someone who still believes things can get better. Most of your species, you have been doing this for so long that you have forgotten how to hope. You manage problems instead of solving them. You maintain status quo instead of pushing for improvement. And humans are different. Humans are idiots who keep trying impossible things until they stop being impossible. He smiled. We spent thousands of years killing each other over resources, territory, beliefs, and really stupid reasons. But we also kept trying to do better. We failed constantly. We still fail. But we keep trying. That sounds exhausting. It really is. He turned to look at me with all the weight of those weeks in his eyes. But you want to know the secret? The thing that keeps me going even when every logical analysis says we should give up. What? People are worth it. All of you, every stubborn, frustrating, beautiful species in this council, you are worth the effort. Because occasionally, just occasionally, I get to watch a Quilmec and a Tanthri teach each other recipes and remember that we are all just beings trying to survive in an incomprehensibly vast universe. And if I can make that a little easier, even a little bit better, then all the headaches are worth it. I felt something shift in my central consciousness, some fundamental understanding clicking into place. You are not just solving problems, I said slowly. You are teaching us to be better than we were. I am teaching you to remember that you already know how to be better. You just forgot because bureaucracy is comfortable and change is scary. He clapped me on one of my shoulders. But you are getting there. Another few decades and you might not even need me anymore. Decades? I activated all my vocal cords in alarm. You plan to stay that long? Vrok, my friend, I am just getting started. And he was right. Over the following months, Marcus continued to transform the council. Not through grand declarations or sweeping reforms, but through small, persistent changes that accumulated like drops of water wearing down stone. He made delegates eat lunch together. He forced enemies to collaborate on minor projects before tackling major conflicts. He replaced formal protocols with direct conversations. He chose effectiveness over elegance, results over procedure, and people over politics. The galaxy changed because one human refused to accept that things had to stay the way they always were. I changed too. I learned to question regulations that served no purpose. I started solving problems instead of documenting them. I discovered that breaking a few rules in service of doing good was not just acceptable, it was necessary. 1 year after Marcus took office, the council had the highest approval ratings in recorded history. Trade had increased by 400%. Active conflicts had decreased by 82%. And species that had spent millennia isolated were now working together on projects that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. During the anniversary celebration, Ambassador Threll gave a speech praising Marcus's leadership. Councillor Yixa, who had initially opposed his appointment, presented him with a traditional serpentine honor that was only given to the most respected individuals. Marcus accepted it all with his characteristic informality, making jokes and deflecting praise onto the people who had actually done the work. But later, when the celebration wound down and most delegates had returned to their quarters, I found him back on the observation deck, same spot as before, looking at the same stars. They asked if humans could lead, I said, standing beside him. Now the galaxy follows us. They follow because they choose to, Marcus corrected. That is the important part. I did not conquer anyone or force compliance. I just showed them a different way was possible and let them decide if they wanted to try it. And they chose to try. Most of them. There are holdouts, resistors, people who hate everything I represent. That is okay. Change does not require unanimous consent, just critical mass. We stood in silence for a moment, watching vessels drift past the station, carrying goods and people and ideas across the vast network that connected hundreds of worlds. What happens when you leave? I asked quietly. When you return to Earth or move on to whatever humans do next. Marcus smiled. That is the thing, Vrok. I am not the point. I am just the catalyst. The actual work, the real change, that is happening because your people are choosing to do things differently. When I leave, and I will eventually, you will keep going. You will keep solving problems and breaking stupid rules and remembering that bureaucracy serves people, not the other way around. You have that much faith in us. I have that much faith in anyone who is willing to learn. He turned to look at me directly. Besides, I have seen what you become when you stop hiding behind protocols. You are brilliant, Vrok. All of you are. You just needed someone to remind you. As I stood there beside the human who had turned my entire worldview upside down, I realized something profound. The question was never whether humans could lead. The question was whether the rest of us were brave enough to follow them into uncertainty, to embrace change over comfort, to choose hope over cynicism. We asked if humans could lead. Now the galaxy follows us into a future none of us can predict, but all of us are building together. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, other species are watching and wondering if they too might be ready for something different, something better, something worth the risk. They will ask their own questions. They will face their own doubts. But they will remember that once, in a galaxy grown stale with endless protocol and comfortable stagnation, one human said, "Watch this," and changed everything. That is the legacy Marcus Reeves built. Not through conquest or dominance, but through the simple, radical act of believing we could all do better. And we did.